Okay, I saw that we could record our final reflection for this class, so that's what I'm going to do. Um, I'm going to attach another document when I turn this in. That's going to be the citations that I'm using for what I'm saying. Okay, so the first question. Describe the Salish Sea as you would describe it to your grandmother or future grandchild, seventh generation of thinking. Include a description of your own sense of place here in the Salish Sea with examples of getting to know it more intimately through your place sketches in the first 5 weeks. Include your definition of the Salish Sea and what you have learned about this place this quarter. For full credit, you must specify with citations. Okay, cool. So, okay, I'm going to start with defining the Salish Sea in my own words, which I've written down already, but yeah. So, okay, the Salish Sea is a bioregion that goes from Whitecap to Whitecap. It includes the top of the Strait of Georgia and the bottom of the Puget Sound and some of the land that surrounds the body of water. And the land that surrounds the watersheds that feed into the Puget Sound and Strait of Georgia as well. The current state of the Salish Sea, it's not in such a good spot at the moment. The glaciers are melting. We learned in week 9 from Professor Lutz and in her lecture and the slides that the seafloor and hood canal is hypoxic because algae blooms, and the decomposition of those algae blooms on the seafloor is taking away a bunch of oxygen, so there's a lot of problems in hood canal. We learned in week 5 from lecture by Professor Lutz that the salmon are struggling to get by because of pollution in highly developed rivers. There's chemicals in tires that are just totally killing salmon. They can't make it upstreams because of dust from tires getting into rivers. So there's a lot of problems in the Salish Sea currently, but I'm hoping that in the future, water management changes around the Salish Sea, and that Canada and the U.S. start working together more than they are currently to fix the problems that we're facing. A good example is from Emma Norman in her writing, The Boundless Water and Bounded People, which we read in class. One of the big problems with having a body of water that's governed by two, totally foreign countries, not totally foreign, but they don't work together super well, is what I'm trying to say. That the Semiahmoo people are kept from harvesting shellfish in the land that they usually, the land that the treaty rights that they signed allowed them to fish on. And just because of the way that the Canadian part of Boundary Bay and the U.S. part of Boundary Bay are managed, the U.S. part of Boundary Bay, they're allowed to gather shellfish on again because it's been cleaned and monitored, whereas the Canadian side remains, totally off limits to them, which is obviously a problem that I'm hoping gets solved in the future. I'm also hoping that Native American tribes continue to have their treaty rights to fish as formerly, and that's not infringed on anymore like it has been in the past with Billy Frank Jr. him fighting for the right. I'm just hoping that doesn't happen again. My own sense of place was developed through sketching my backyard a number of times this quarter. I feel like my sense of place, the past spring at least, has been largely centered around how the seasons have been changing. We went from winter almost into summer now, and I've been noticing a lot of the trees changing, flowers have been blooming, birds, there's way more than there were in the start of the quarter and in the winter. Insects are coming out from everywhere. And so I think that is mostly how I'm experiencing this place currently is kind of through nature and how it's responding to the regular cycles that we go through as the seasons change. Okay, this is my recording of my response to the second prompt, which is, with respect to the place portfolio, describe your research process. How did the place research challenge you, develop your research skills, and enhance your Salish Sea learning? So my research process pretty much mostly consisted of I would find the information that I needed. Like, for example, when writing my or creating my story map, we specifically needed valuable, like, peer-reviewed sources, which were easy to find for a lot of things from the Salish Sea Atlas that Dr. Aquila Flower created. But it was pretty hard to find other information about Main Island. Specifically, I wanted to know how in the in the northwest corner of the island, it's First Nations owned land, and I wanted to know how that became First Nations owned land. But I really couldn't find information that was reliable. First I tried with, the library's OneSearch, and then I ended up actually just Googling it, but none of the sources I could find agreed with each other, and none of them seemed peer-reviewed or really all that reliable. So I ended up just not including any information about how that land became First Nations owned land for the sake of accuracy. So that's something that I've really developed in this class, making sure that the sources that I'm using, instead of just deciding to use one of them that says what I want it to say, making sure that multiple sources agree and that they are reliable. Place research contributed to my understanding of my place in the Salish Sea because I found Main Island to be really similar to San Juan Islands, like Marrowstone. Just in terms of like how big it was, like Lummi Island is like, obviously pretty small. Main Island is also pretty small. So it just kind of, I don't know, I kind of developed the understanding that even though there's an international border there, on the other side of the border, it's really much the same as it is here. A specific example of that is from when I was writing the letters across the Salish Sea. I wrote one of them to Lisa Marie Barron, about the Canadian Parliament Bill C-125. So I was researching about, how specifically the waters around Nanaimo, which is where Lisa Marie Barron is from, how those are being affected by climate change, and turns out it's really similar to how it is here, based on what we've learned in, I think it was week 8 or so, week 7 and 8, when we learned about sort of around the Olympic Peninsula, things that are affecting our waters around there. In Canada, it's really totally the same. So that's part of how my sense of place around here is developed through research for my place portfolio. Okay, this is prompt 3. Select a course topic from lecture or your place portfolio assignments, species story, and other things that was especially impactful in building your own sense of place in the Salish Sea. Describe the topic and why it helped you to learn about the Salish Sea. What additional questions did this topic present for you? Moving forward, how does this compel future actions, voting, or learning about the Salish Sea? Okay, so from week 6 lectures from Professor Lutz, We learned about extractive industries and reciprocal economies, and those kind of made me think about how can I give back to the places that I live, and the like the things that I eat. How can I give back to the ecosystems that those came from? Um, I hadn't considered how or why we should give back to the ecosystems that surround us, and what alternatives there were to extractive industries. Before this, I had kind of thought about farming as like, okay, we're using the land, we're taking the things that the sun and the soil produce for us, and we're just using them, and we're not there's no consideration about how those ecosystems matter. So after learning about reciprocal economies, I've tried to visualize what reciprocal economies would look like in my life. And I think that sort of seems like I'm playing with a toy manatee. That sort of seems like in my situation, I guess I would try to be as low impact as possible, because obviously I'm not doing my own farming. So I think I would, use the most sustainable practices possible that I can, and then give back to the ecosystems that I can influence, such as those around us, like, helping to clean up Whatcom Creek, or just being involved in cleanup sites and things like that, volunteering. In the future, I'd like to see everywhere being sort of like how the British Columbian Marine Protected Areas are described in the Canadian government website, which was one of our readings. There's regulations protecting the populations of things that are being harvested, and I think that's really important for transferring or transitioning from an extractive industry like fishing has been traditionally, not traditionally, but since colonists came, and how fishing could be a reciprocal economy, if we're only fishing to keep the populations at a healthy level, because obviously overpopulation is a bad thing. So if we're only fishing to the point where we're keeping populations at a healthy spot, that would be a reciprocal economy. So I'd like to see that take place in a lot more areas, just besides the marine protected areas in British Columbia. Additional questions this topic presented for me. I mean, it's obviously, I think I already covered this in sort of saying how I find it difficult to see how I could use reciprocal economies in my own life, but like I said, I think there's ways around that, in sort of creating a pseudo-reciprocal economy where I'm contributing to the ecosystems around me and trying to be as low impact as possible in the things that I do consume.